Howdy, everybody. Dr. Andy Woods here. Welcome to Pastor's Point of View, number 371. This is being released on August the 29th, 2025. And as you look at our preview slide, we've got a prophecy update for you today. In this particular session, we're really going to focus on two major issues. Number one, the temple. And there's some big rumblings you need to be aware of concerning the rebuilding of temple number 3. And then we're going to talk also about how the world is turning against Israel from unlikely sources, from a group of people that I'm going to call the woke right. And that fits into the blueprint of all the nations turning against Israel in the last days. It's happening right before our very eyes. Starting off here with the temple, when we talk about temple number 3 in Bible prophecy, our biblical entry point is the book of Daniel, chapter 9 and verse 27. Daniel predicts this: he, that's the Antichrist, will make a firm covenant with the many, that's Israel, for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, that's right at the midpoint, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes desolate. Here's a chart that we refer to frequently describing what Daniel is predicting in this verse, this coming 7-year tribulation period. And right in the middle of it, according to Daniel's prophecy, will be the Antichrist desecrating the rebuilt Jewish temple, temple number 3. Now, how can that prophecy be fulfilled literally, and all God's prophecies come to pass literally, unless a temple number 3 is in existence? Here is a list that we refer to frequently, Israel's 4 temples. We're talking here about temple number 3. The Solomonic temple was number 1, destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, by the way. The Zerubbabel's temple was number 2, built by the returnees from the Babylonian captivity. That temple was destroyed by the Romans in AD 70. So for 2,000 years, the nation of Israel hasn't had a temple. So how can the Antichrist desecrate a Jewish temple midway through the tribulation period? Answer: the Jews have to rebuild it first. So as they start to rebuild it and show an appetite for rebuilding it, it shows you where we are in the prophetic scale of things. We're rapidly moving towards the 7-year tribulation period, because temple number 3 has to be in existence for the tribulation period prophecies to be fulfilled. An appetite within Israel to rebuild temple number 3 tells us that the tribulation period is approaching. So it's with those thoughts in mind that we bring to you a few headlines related to temple number 3. Notice this article by Charisma, August 25th, 2025. Won't spend a lot of time here, but just pointing out what this article brings up. It says the Temple Institute in Jerusalem. Now that's the group, one of the groups within Israel that really wants to rebuild temple number 3, announced the following on Facebook. They say, for the first time in 2,000 years, the shofar, and you see it there, what a shofar looks like, is being sounded on the Temple Mount. The article sort of summarizes a rising Jewish desire to worship on the Temple Mount. It says, in recent years, Jewish activity on the Temple Mount has sharply increased. Record numbers of Jewish visitors are making pilgrimages, with official counts surpassing 56,000 in the past year. Restrictions have loosened, allowing public prayer and even prostration once prohibited on the Temple Mount. Priestly blessings have been carried out alongside the blowing of the shofars and trumpets, all pointing to renewal efforts to restore Jewish worship on the Mount. These developments reveal an unmistakable rise in Jewish yearning to worship at the most sacred site, for many a preparation for the restoration of the temple. The article says this: it's happening. And then the article kind of concludes as follows: the book of Revelation, and some of these verses we had on the screen a little earlier when we were talking about temple number 3. The book of Revelation describes a rebuilt temple that will one day be desecrated by the Antichrist, Revelation 11. 2 Thessalonians 2. Jesus himself commanded us to watch the signs of the times, urging vigilance as the day of his return draws near. Some have put it this way: when the discussion of the world moves to Israel, you're dealing with God's hour hand on his stopwatch. When the discussion of the world gets more focused and starts to focus on the city of Jerusalem, now we're dealing with his minute hand on his stopwatch. And then when the discussion of the world moves to the Temple Mount, which is where everything is now headed, we're dealing with his second hand. And so these are things that we look to give us some kind of indication as to where we are on God's calendar, prophetic calendar. Notice this particular screenshot from X, and it says this: now that this has happened, the Messiah can build the third temple in Jerusalem. It says Adam King claims that the announcement that the red heifers in Israel were disqualified as impure was a trick, and that they actually sacrificed a red heifer. Now, let me kind of explain things just a little bit to you on this red heifer business. This relates to something in the book of Numbers, chapter 19, where you have to have a purely red heifer, I think one stray hair or something to that effect is allowed. But other than that, it has to be completely and totally pure. And even that one stray strand depends on whose rule book you're following. Are you following Torah? Are you following rabbinical interpretation? Are you following Mishnah? Are you following Talmud? So there's debates within Israel about this. But once they breed this pure red heifer, then it's sacrificed, and the ashes of that red heifer are then used to consecrate, dedicate Israel's central sanctuary, which in this case is temple number 3. And the fact that there is an interest within Israel concerning the red heifer shows us that in their minds anyway, they're very dead set on rebuilding temple number 3, because they're putting into existence the ashes of the red heifer, which are necessary for the consecration and dedication of this temple. Now, we reported on a prior pastor's point of view, it might have been the last one or the one just before that there were a number of red heifers shipped from Rockwall, Texas, to Israel to be examined to see if they could qualify in terms of purity to be this red heifer. And all of them, we were told, and we reported on this show, were disqualified. But I'm going to give you some updated information on this, that there actually has been, and I didn't know it at the time, of course, when we reported on this, but since then, information has come out indicating that there has actually been a red heifer that qualifies, that has been sacrificed, the ashes of which the Israelis now have. And they've kept this secret. Why have they kept this secret? Because according to Hamas and their own admission, the reason the events of October 7th, 2023 happened, in full or in part is anybody's guess, but this is what Hamas spokespersons have said. And when they said this on pastor's point of view many seasons back. We reported on it, but they said the reason the October 7th events happened is because of the red cows. So if Israel moving towards a red heifer is going to cause a problem like October the 7th, it's easy to understand why the Israelis would keep the current ashes of a genetically pure red heifer under wraps until now. So we have a quick video. Actually, it's not a quick video. It goes a few minutes to play for you on this, which will bring you up to speed. So let's go ahead and run that video at this time.
This was a big thing over at InfoWars and on the dissident right media for the longest time, the Jew hate media. Yeah, do you have my tweet that I actually put on my...
Yes.
So I basically, what happened, if you want to go to the first slide first before we play the video, about a month ago on July 1st,
That one, right?
there was an announcement that they were going to do a practice run of the red heifer. And prior to this, the media outrage that the Jews were going to go do this red heifer, you had like these lunatics like Stu Peters and others who were saying, this is going to usher in the Antichrist, blah, blah, blah. And it was like a real big media balagan. It was really a bad twist. So they said that and also the government wasn't going to let them. So what they did was they said, we're just going to do a practice one with one of the 5 disqualified cows. The government said, okay, whatever. They ended up going out, doing a real cow. One of the cow's name was Tikva. They made the offering, and it was a real offering. They did it all by the laws, and I have with me some of the ashes right here, red heifer ashes. It's pretty incredible. The red heifer, the last time that the red heifer was done was over 2,000 years ago. The first time it was done by Moses. The second time it was done by Ezra from the book in the Bible. And that shows you how long the ashes can last for. So a pure red heifer doesn't come about all the time. And in this generation, we had 21 of them that were born.
Pure.
Pure. They picked 7 to bring to Israel, and out of the 7, Israel only allowed them to have 5 brought in, and they've been sitting around just doing nothing because the media outrage has been so astronomical about it. But the red heifer people, they fooled everybody, and they successfully performed the ritual about a month ago. Now, in the ritual, you're supposed to have hyssop. I have also hyssop that is from the actual ritual, and also the red heifer ashes, and these get put into a clay jar and then sprinkled on people in a healing ritual, and it removes the impurity of death and allows for people to heal. So since this started, they have been sprinkling on people. There was a man with Alzheimer's who just started remembering everything, sight to the blind. There's some real miracles that have happened in the last month since this thing has gone down. But the ashes, just like I have a little bag, there was 10.5 gallons of ashes, and this is only a dime bag full. And these ashes have been disseminated. They're here to stay. They will never be found. So many people have them. And this little bag can power about 10,000 doses.
Power about it's that makes it sound like really potent cocaine.
It packs a punch. Yeah,
This is the stuff right here,
test
man.
it for fent.
This is the. But we could go smoke this after the show. But no, I'm just kidding. Come back from the dead after you do something like that. But I have a video from the ritual, and if you want to play it, I don't know if you're. It has copyrighted music. Can you slide it so people could see the slide?
Yeah, I've been doing that.
So these are the slides of the actual ceremony being taken place, and that's Tikva, and everything was done specifically according to halacha, which is Jewish law.
Mm-hmm.
It was a perfect cow, and meaning that it doesn't have a single hair that is not red. And also, it could never have been burdened with work. So you can't even lean a shovel up against the cow. They have to be treated in a very specific way for their whole life. And then the person who does the ritual can never have been in contact with death. So basically, they're not allowed to go to. They have to be of a specific bloodline. And what they do was they raise these children in like these elevated homes above the ground, and they never leave the home until they're ready to do the rituals. And that's like how they never come into contact with death. So the priest who did this literally lived in his home for over 20 years before he...
Never left?
Nope. Because he was born to do this ritual.
Wow.
And now that it's been done, the Messiah can come.
Okay, so this is you're talking about the return of the Messiah.
Return of the Mac. Here we go.
So this is like the Jewish Messiah is going to come back. Would that be similar? Would that be like the return of Christ, or would it be a different?
Here's
guy?
the thing: I think the most fundamental difference between Judaism and Christianity is that Judaism actually believes in reincarnation, and so the Messiah is here in every generation, and there's a process by which we are awakened enough to accept the Messiah. So if the Messiah doesn't come, he dies. He's reconstituted, born into the matrix again, and has to find his way back to another thing. We can't build the temple until this happened. And now that this happened, the Messiah can come build the third temple.
So that is sort of one of those things that just takes your breath away. I mean, we've been talking about this third temple and the red heifer and that issue for so long. Now you have these people in Israel that think that the red heifer sacrifice is already a done deal. They just had to keep it underground or secret to prevent another October the 7th. So obviously, if all of this is true, we are moving very, very aggressively towards the rebuilding of Temple number 3, which is right on schedule with what Bible prophecy anticipates for the end of the age. Now, obviously, with something like this, there's some theology there, that we're not going to give us some kind of blanket endorsement to. He talked about reincarnation. He talked about the ashes of this supposedly pure red heifer can get rid of cancer and circumvent death. And they obviously believe a lot of things that's outside of our theological framework. And so I'm not showing you this video to promote those ideas. I'm just showing this video to show you what is in the conversation. The conversation isn't about Israel anymore. It's not about Jerusalem anymore. The whole conversation is about the temple, the third temple, and what is a prerequisite, the ashes of the red heifer for purposes of rededication or dedication, what is a prerequisite for the third temple. This is where the conversation is going. Now, notice also this screenshot from someone named Byron Stinson. Who is Byron Stinson? Byron Stinson is as I understand it, the rancher, shall we put it that way, the breeder, who sent those, I can't remember if it was 5 or 6 red heifers to Israel from Rockwall, Texas. And he's a devout believer, as I understand it. And notice what he writes here, because he was integral in all of these things. He says, and I'll just read the highlighted parts. It says, so it should be recognized as the first, in over 2,000 years. He says, many will come to question and fight against the ceremony. I just think the world needs to know the ceremony went perfect, and with a perfect priest in a place outside the camp. And in the opinion of those we respect, we used a perfect red heifer. The ceremony was done before Hashem, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in the eyes of someone who has been integral in the process in terms of breeding and shipping red heifers from Rockwall, Texas to Israel, I mean, he's of the view that there was a red heifer that indeed was sacrificed, and Israel has the ashes of that particular red heifer, which shows us that they have the tools that they need to rededicate temple number 3, which to my mind means temple number 3 can't be far away. And that's why we bring this subject matter up to you in a prophecy update. Let's switch topics here, and let's talk about our second topic that we're going to try to handle in this session: the world against Israel. The thing to understand about these various signs is they're happening in confluence. They're happening in convergence with one another. It's not just a single sign happening. It's all kinds of signs coming together in concert. And one of the things the Bible is very clear about is worldwide hatred for the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, called anti-Semitism, would not decrease but would accelerate as we get closer to the end of the age, and in fact would reach a fever pitch. Here's a graphic that we frequently refer to. It's basically designed to get people to read Revelation chapter 12, verses 6 through 17, where Satan will lose access permanently to God's throne room midway through the tribulation period, right after the beast desecrates the temple, and he'll plummet to the earth. And as we've explained many times, at that point in history, he will seek to declare war on, gobble up, destroy the nation of Israel. So God's kingdom program in and through Israel can't be accomplished. And this is all things that will happen in the second half of the tribulation period, which means anti-Semitism isn't going to go away. It's actually going to increase as we get closer to the end of the age. The whole world, we're told, will turn against the nation of Israel. We frequently refer to a couple of prophecies in Zechariah to communicate this. Notice Zechariah 12 and verse 3. It says, "It will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem," and keep in mind, folks, the nation of Israel didn't have Jerusalem from AD 70 until 1967. "I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will be severely injured, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it." Conservative nations and liberal nations, Christian nations, so-called, and non-Christian nations will all uniformly come against and hate the nation of Israel. Zechariah 14, verse 2, communicates the same thing a chapter or two later. These are prophecies that were given 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Jesus ever walked this earth. And Zechariah predicted, "I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle." Notice again the emphasis on all the nations. All means all. And we're living now in a season where the whole world is turning against Israel. They're blaming Israel for oppression. Everything that's wrong in the world is somehow Israel's fault. And as we look at some of those accusations coming from pundits, political commentators, and politicians that you like, probably, as I do or did, you may not like them after I show you some of these video clips. But they're all coming against Israel, blaming Israel for everything that's wrong in the world. And of course, that's ridiculous when you look at this map, because that little red dot is the nation of Israel, and the arrow that we have pointing to that red dot was necessary because the red dot, unless you have that arrow pointing to it, is almost invisible on that map. Israel is so small, about the size of New Jersey, surrounded by hostile Islamic theocratic dictatorships, which have as their verbal things that they spew out, and also in their written charters, language in which they are essentially swearing to Allah that they are going to take the nation of Israel and drive it into the Mediterranean Sea. I mean, obviously, and this is a map that will never show up on Fox News. It will never show up on CNN. It will never show up on MSNBC. It will never show up on any major media outlet, because if people could see that map, there would be worldwide sympathy and support for the nation of Israel. Israel is not the oppressor. She is very much the underdog. And yet all of these people that I'm going to go into here a little bit are portraying Israel as if she's some kind of oppressive force. It's the old transforming David into Goliath strategy. So one of the things that they're trying to do is they're trying to turn worldwide sympathy away from Israel and against Israel, because Israel has been very successful and very effective in rooting Hamas out of Gaza. And so if you're Hamas, what do? You try to change world opinion. And how do you try to change world opinion? Through yellow journalism. You tell lies. If you repeat a lie long enough, people will believe it, as the saying goes. And as I think it was Mark Twain who said, a lie, will make its way halfway around the world before the truth, gets its shoes on, in the morning. You have to lie and lie and lie about Israel and convince the world that Israel is some kind of oppressor. And one of the things that they're saying is Israel is starving the inhabitants of Gaza, and they're using fake photos to do it. Notice this article from Breitbart. This is August 5th, 2025. It says, report, anti-Israel photographer stages photographs of hunger in Gaza. And here's what the article says. It says, a photographer whose work is routinely picked up by international agencies reportedly stages photographs of hunger in Gaza, emphasizing women and children and avoiding showing Palestinians receiving food, German Bild says. Photographer, and it gives his name here, is a freelance journalist commissioned by Turkish news agency let's see if I can pronounce this, Anadolu. Potential problem, the scene captured by other photographers as well shows mostly adult men waiting for food and getting it. Because this particular journalist, and it's got journalists there in quotes, apparently has a mission, free Palestine. That's what it says on a bombastic painting he presents on his Instagram account. The artist who created the image for this particular photographer is an avowed Jew hater. In the Gaza Strip, almost exclusively Palestinian photographers are now taking photographs, quite a few of them with Hamas connections. Historians and photography expert Gerhard Paul told a particular outlet, quote, in southern Gaza, Hamas controls 100% of the image production, close quote. The goal to generate sympathy in the West and stir up anger against Israel. The Israeli foreign minister shared this article, noting that Hamas uses staged photographs transmitted by an anti-Israel freelancers and news agencies to, quote, manipulate global opinion, close quote. Notice that expression, global opinion. That's what Zechariah predicted. The world, all nations, would turn against Israel. Journalist, his last name is Mayer, noted that the photos of starving Palestinian children who turned out to have other maladies were published on front pages throughout the world. Only 4 newspapers, aside from the New York Post, initially did the same, with photos of Israeli hostages being starved deliberately by Hamas, and they were all Israeli outlets. So the bottom line is the journalism here and the photography here is staged, and it's one-sided. and it's designed to lie over and over again that Israel, by what they're doing in Gaza, is not rooting Hamas out of Gaza, but is starving the inhabitants of Gaza. We have this screenshot here from Time magazine, and this was splashed all over international media, and the whole thing is fake. It's staged. It's acting. It's made up. Some of the information I've received on this is when you go into these Gaza Hamas-controlled areas, it's not the women that go out to collect the food that's offered to them, it's the men. Well, that doesn't fit well with so-called journalism that has an agenda. Let's get the women out there. And they take their food, and then the men leave. It's not like what you see in this photograph where, they just stay there. You fill up one bucket or one pail, one plate, and they stay there and say, fill up the next bucket, fill up the next bucket. Well, that's not how it works. So obviously this whole thing is contrived. It's made up. Israel is after Hamas, rightfully so, and very effectively in Hamas, but Israel is not involved, like that picture would have you believe, in starving the inhabitants of Gaza, according to this Breitbart piece. Let's continue down this road, if we could, and talk a bit about the woke right. If you covered up the names and faces of some of these people that I'm going to introduce you to here in just a moment, and you just listen to what they said, you would think that their anti-Israel comments are coming from, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, the Reverend Jeremiah Wright, sort of leftist, left-wing figures who have been spewing anti-Semitism for a long time. After all, we expect anti-Semitism from them. But these people that are now espousing these anti-Semitic views are not these are sentiments not coming from the left. These are sentiments coming from the conservative movement. People that have the moniker conservative, people that Americans typically think have a bibliocentric, Bible-centric worldview. And as anti-Semitism comes from the left and spreads into what I call the woke right, you can see how Zechariah's prophecies are jumping off the page, because Zechariah predicts everyone, right, left, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, will turn against the nation of Israel. So a textbook example of this is Tucker Carlson. Here is an article from camera.org, and it says Tucker Carlson allows a Orthodox nun to bear false witness against Israel. This is an article dated August 15th, 2025 by David Orenstein, and it is just an outstanding article. It's the best article that I have ever run into critiquing this propaganda piece put out by Tucker Carlson interviewing this nun. And it just fact by fact by fact dismantles everything that was said in this particular article. So a little bit about this article. The author says Tucker Carlson is at it again. This time, Tucker Carlson platformed Mother Agapia Stephanopoulos, an Orthodox nun, on his August 11th, 2025 show entitled, "Here's What It's Really Like to Live as a Christian in the Holy Land," close quote. And this author's got the defamatory and slanderous statements organized by at least three, actually there's four, but we don't have time to cover three major categories. And as you look at the end of this article, it's got, I think, around 34 footnotes. So the author is saying, don't take my word for it. Here's the footnotes where you can research these things yourself. Excuse me, I misspoke. There's not 34 footnotes, there's 43 footnotes. And this is the kind of writing that we need today. Writing that's terse, factual, to the point, well substantiated, because that's the only way to cut through the massive propaganda that most people are experiencing, including those of us in the conservative movement, as we sit under people that we thought were conservative, like Tucker Carlson. The author says this: Mother Stephanopoulos states that studies done on Palestinians living there in Palestine now show that they are Canaanite descendants, without noting the research that demonstrates comparable genetic links connecting the Jews to ancient Canaanites. And this is the first category that the author is covering: unsubstantiated false claims and suggestions. Here's another one. The Orthodox nun falsely identifies Palestinians as the first Christians at the time of Christ. The refutation is followers of Jesus were commonly adopting the term as a self-designation beginning in the 2nd century, long after Jesus left the earth. Here's another false claim that this particular nun advocates. Another false claim made by Mother Stephanopoulos is that Israel was responsible for the American invasion of Iraq in 2003. In fact, Israeli leaders had wanted the Bush administration to focus on the Iranian nuclear threat, not Iraq. See, what does Solomon say in the Proverbs? If my memory serves, this is around Proverbs 18, I think verse 17, but look it up to make sure I've got the address right. It basically says one man sounds right until another comes and cross-examines him. And this is what you don't have happening on these type of Tucker Carlson propaganda pieces. There's no cross-examination. Carlson sits there and he asks leading questions, and he's hoping a lot of people will buy into his narrative because it's coming from a nun. I mean, who could disagree with a nun? But this nun is nothing more than a propaganda piece, as this particular article demonstrates. Another falsehood. She also falsely claimed that Israel has refused to give water to the city of Bethlehem and cruelly uses its control of access to the water as a weapon to target Palestinian towns, even as Israelis use water for leisure. Refutation: Israel has increased the amount of water it supplies to towns such as Bethlehem and Hebron, and also has increased the amount of water at night during the month of Ramadan. So Muslims who fast during those days are able to drink water at night. This is completely contrary to the false impression created by Mother Stephanopoulos. Here is another falsehood. She claimed, Mother Stephanopoulos, the author says, falsely suggested that Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, deliberately targeted the Holy Family Church in Gaza. Refutation: her suggestion that the Israeli military deliberately targeted the church contradicts an Israeli probe that found that the church was hit by a misfired munition during IDF activities nearby. I see, if Tucker Carlson was doing real journalism, he would have both sides on, but he's not interested in that. He's not interested in journalism. He's interested in creating a narrative. And when you're interested in creating a narrative rather than doing actual journalism, you have to suppress those details that contradict your narrative. Here's another falsehood. Echoing false allegations made by other media outlets, Mother Stephanopoulos states that Israeli settlers attacked a historic church in Taba and burned the grass and bush in the area. In fact, there was no evidence of a fire in the church itself, which was undamaged. Another falsehood. Mother Stephanopoulos falsely claims that Israelis have scorn for Americans and in general don't have any love for Americans while lacking gratitude for the United States, despite American military and diplomatic support for the state of Israel. In fact, Israelis have the most favorable view of the United States in the world, with the Pew Research Center observing 83% of Israelis reporting a favorable opinion of the United States. And then the author switches subjects a little bit and talks about misrepresented realities on the ground. Carlson states, I keep reading that the Christian population in the region has declined dramatically since Israel became a state in 1948, and I'm not quite sure why. Mother Stephanopoulos simplistically attributes this Christian population decline to Israeli expansionism and domination. Here's the refutation. In contradistinction to the historical trend of Christian population decline in the broader Middle East, the Israeli Christian population has grown and flourished in the region's only state where Islam is not the dominant religion. Another falsehood that she disseminates. Mother Stephanopoulos falsely asserts that there are certain roads for Israelis only. Israel is guilty, therefore, of apartheid. Refutation. This claim misrepresents the reality on the ground. Such roads are restricted for security reasons, and all Israeli citizens, Jews, Christians, and Muslims are permitted to use them. Another falsehood she disseminates. Israel is guilty of genocide. Mother Stephanopoulos accuses the state of Israel of committing genocide. Here's the refutation. The Palestinian Central Bureau indicated that as of 2013, the Palestinian population has increased eightfold after the Jewish state's establishment, and the United States Census Bureau International Database indicates that since 1960, the Gazan population grew 600%. You know, if Israel is committing genocide, I think, as Ambassador Huckabee said, she's doing a real lousy job of it. Facts are stubborn things. Another dissemination of a falsehood. The Orthodox nun falsely suggested here that Israelis claimed that fighters were in the Church of the Nativity to justify Israeli acts of aggression against the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. In fact, Israel's military activities in the area as part of Operation Defensive Shield were preceded by the murder of approximately 300 Israelis in Palestinian terrorist attacks over a period of 1.5 years during the Second Intifada. Another falsehood. Mother Stephanopoulos fails to acknowledge the setting up of checkpoints and a separation barrier were necessary to prevent terrorist attacks following a campaign of Palestinian suicide bombings that resulted in the murder and maiming of Israeli civilians during the Second Intifada. That particular refutation, the author includes to refute the lie that Israel needlessly inconveniences Palestinians with checkpoints and a barrier. Another falsehood. Israel is guilty of launching unprovoked military actions against Gazans. Mother Stephanopoulos states that Israel has intervened many times in Gaza and little by little destroyed leaving viewers with the false impression that the Jewish state has launched unprovoked military actions targeting Gaza civilians. In fact, Israeli military activities in Gaza were launched in response to Palestinian acts of violence that targeted Israeli civilians. And then she goes on and she kind of whitewashes the October 7th massacre in this interview, which is not an interview. It's a propaganda piece. The author says she referred to what happened on October 7th as the October event, without detailing the violence perpetuated against Israeli civilians that day. In describing Hamas later in the interview, she erroneously states, I would say they are a resistance movement. That's all Hamas is in her mind, a resistance movement. They're simply people fighting for their people, trying to protect their land. This description, the author says, completely sanitizes the brutal, radical, Islamist, and anti-Semitic nature of Hamas, an internationally recognized terrorist organization dedicated to the destruction of the state of Israel and the murder of the Jews. Confirming her refusal to blame Israel, Mother Stephanopoulos stated, Hamas is not the problem, close quote. I mean, she just sat there and made one ridiculous statement after another, and Tucker Carlson did zero to rebut, refute, and just asked her one leading question after another, getting her to sound off in this way. I guess people think, well, she's spiritual. She's got, the nun's hat cover on. So she lives in the land, so she must be telling the truth, when the truth of the matter is she's nothing more than a propagandist. She made some inaccurate generalizations about the Christian Zionist motivations. Here's a couple that hit home. She said that's Christian Zionists, believe in the idea of the rapture. They believe that it's sort of this cruel bargain they have going with Israel, because basically what they say is they're going to be swooped up into heaven. Actually, the correct terminology is harpazo, caught up, 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 17, but I don't mean to quibble here. It says, right, and then there's going to be 1,000-year kingdom, and they'll be they'll be the end. Then there'll be the end of the world and the judgment of Christ, and he'll come back. So apparently she doesn't like evangelical Christians like ourselves that believe in a future 1,000-year kingdom of Christ, a coming 7-year tribulation period that will precede that 1,000-year kingdom, and the rapture of the church, which will precede that coming 7-year tribulation period. See, this whole interview is designed to move Christendom away from Zionism, dispensationalism, who have been historic supporters of the nation of Israel. This was as part of a political narrative. Later in the interview, she states these Christians of wrong belief, Christian Zionists, believe that they need to build the temple as part of their plan. Christian Zionists want the temple built. It's natural to all of them to do so. Their beliefs tell them it's okay. We want to have this third world war because we're going to be taken away, and we'll be okay, and we'll come back later after all the fighting is done. That's sort of basically what their theology tells them. In the meantime, the Jews are supposed to convert to their brand of Christianity or die in the conflagration. Let me tell you, folks, that is a total misrepresentation of what we believe. It's a funny thing. Dispensationalists like myself, for example, have been accused for a long time of creating political apathy because we're not bringing in the kingdom. We think the kingdom is yet future, and it's subsequent to the second advent of Christ. So when you think that way, based on Scripture, you're accused of political apathy. But then another group comes along and says, you dispensationalists have so much political power that you're going to cause World War III in the Middle East. So which is it? Do we have no political influence, or do we have so much influence that we're going to cause World War III? That's how you know you're being subjected to propaganda, because there are these massive internal contradictions in the narrative people are trying to force feed you. The truth of the matter is, we as Zionists and dispensationalists have no desire to somehow cause the third temple to be rebuilt. I mean, I'm not going to spend my time and money and energy trying to promote the building of the third temple. I just know, as I've tried to explain on this broadcast a little earlier, that temple number 3 is going to be up and functioning midway through the tribulation period. God doesn't need any help from us in fulfilling his prophecies. It just shows us that he's on the verge of fulfilling a major prophecy, which is necessary for the 7-year tribulation period. So this is a complete and total straw man argument that she is presenting here concerning Christian Zionists. This piece sort of wraps up by talking about how part of this interview, Mother Stephanopoulos praised organizations and individuals that are heavily involved in promoting anti-Israel themes. In the interview, she promoted a group called Jewish Voice for Peace, JVP. This writer says JVP has helped platform terrorists and worked with people with links to violent extremism, such as the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, supermarket bomber, last name O'Day, who murdered 2 Hebrew University students in a 1969 bombing. So do you think when Mother Stephanopoulos on a Tucker Carlson interview promotes JVP, do you think the listeners have any idea what JVP has done in its past and present concerning terrorism? See, all of this is left out of this propaganda piece. She also promoted someone whose last name is Al-Arir. Mother Stephanopoulos describes Gaza poetry professor Al-Arir as beautiful and a graceful person. However, as camera senior research analyst Gilead Innie has documented, Al-Arir has made many hateful statements using dehumanizing rhetoric, including Zionists are the most despicable filth and Zionism is a disease, featuring language reminiscent of that used by Nazis to describe Jews. She also had a lot of, Mother Stephanopoulos that is, a lot of nice things to say about Mel Gibson and Marjorie Taylor Greene. More on Marjorie Taylor Greene in just a little bit. But the article says Gibson has cast doubt on the number of Jews murdered in the Holocaust, has reportedly called Jewish people Hebes, oven dodgers, and Jew boys. Boy, isn't this the same guy that made the Passion for the Christ movie? Makes me not want to see a lot of Mel Gibson movies if he is under the surface, or maybe above the surface, a flaming anti-Semite. Gibson has claimed the Torah made reference to the sacrifice of Christian babies and infants, and he used writings featuring anti-Semitic tropes as a source for the movie The Passion of the Christ. Now, follow the footnotes. That's footnote 37 in this piece, where you can receive documentation of everything that this very, very skillful author is bringing to our attention. As for Marjorie Taylor Greene, her rhetoric has featured anti-Semitic tropes like the influence of Jewish wealth and Jewish disloyalty, and she has promoted conspiracy theories about Rothschild-funded space lasers sparking deadly California wildfires. Mother Stephanopoulos also made reference to other organizations such as Churches for the Middle East, Peace and Telos Group, as examples of Christian groups seeking to help Christians in the Middle East. Former Camera Christian media analyst, last name Zile, pointed out that Churches for Middle East Peace has directed most of its criticisms at Israel and the United States, while mostly staying silent when it comes to the problematic behavior by the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. Tricia Miller, director of Camera's Partnership of Christians and Jews, has documented how the Telos Group presents its conferences and tour participants with a largely one-sided narrative that simplistically depicts Israelis as oppressors and Palestinians as victims. The organization admits the refusal of Palestinian leaders to recognize the state of Israel as a Jewish state and declines to focus on Palestine terrorist attacks against Israelis. I realize I spent a lot of time on that article and I left out a ton of stuff. I hope you'll get this. I hope you'll download it. I hope you'll read it. Hope you'll examine it like a good Berean. I hope you'll make use of these, 43 footnotes here, and send it to people that are Tucker Carlson fans to help them understand that when they sit through something like this that masquerades as a political or current issues interview, that it's nothing more than a propaganda piece. And had there been another reasonable voice present like this author, all of those lies could have been disseminated. But people walk away from that and think, well, this must be the truth because it's coming from a nun and it's coming from a so-called conservative like Tucker Carlson, someone that we trust. Very quickly, Worldview Weekend has an article on this. I won't spend too much time here. This was written by my friend Brandon House, August 14th, 2025. It says, Tucker's anti-Israel platform, exposing Mother Agapia Stephanopoulos' Russian Orthodox ties and KGB shadows. Brandon House writes, Mother Agapia Stephanopoulos, a Russian Orthodox nun, and he says this, a sister of ABC's George Stephanopoulos. Now, isn't that interesting? You watch George Stephanopoulos on the political shows, and you would get the idea that he is an honest journalist. But in fact, the man is a political operative. He's a Clintonista going way back. And there may be some evidence that this so-called nun, who's just a propagandist, is Stephanopoulos' sister. I think we need to do a little more research on that to see if that's true. But that accusation is on the table. Here are the facts concerning this idea that the Israelis are leading some kind of genocide against Christians and Palestinians within the land of Israel. Here are the facts. Gaza Christians declined under Hamas 3% to 0.04%, but not Israel. Bethlehem, controlled by the Palestinian Authority, thanks to the Oslo Accords, from 85% Christian in 1995 to 10% under the Palestinian Authority. Her genocide accusations debunked. Population growth, not decline. Here's how this article wraps up. Platforming voices like Munther Isaac, tied to liberation theology, a Marxist twist on Christianity. Tucker Carlson, whether it's Munther Isaac, whether it's platforming Mother Stephanopoulos, whether it's allowing a musician like John Rich to come on and basically say that the rapture comes from John Nelson Darby, who got it from the Rothschilds. All of these silly accusations that can easily be refuted. Tucker Carlson now has a pattern of doing this. I don't know what's happened to Tucker Carlson. I don't know why he's moving in this direction. I think that's fair game for us to look into. I would say follow the money. Where does his financing now come from now that he's left Fox News? If it's coming from primarily Middle Eastern sources, then now we have a reason to understand why his politics concerning Israel have become so leftist and are really starting to sound like AOC, etc. Brandon House says this: Tucker's guest cited no Bible verses. I mean, how could she cite the Bible? The Bible, of course, is against everything that she is saying here. Let's move from there to look at another member of the woke right, and this is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Here is an article that comes from Israel National News. It says Representative Greene, supposedly a conservative, accuses Israel of using aid for genocide. Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene, sometimes known as Marjorie Traitor Greene, accuses Israel of genocide in Gaza, claiming U.S. military aid funds the alleged actions and that American taxpayers are paying for it. Here's what the article says. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia on Saturday blasted Israel and claimed that the Jewish state is using military aid to pay for genocide in the Gaza Strip. This is what is happening in Gaza, where in spite of what we have all been told, many innocent people and children are being killed, and they are not Hamas, she claimed. Here's what Greene added, who asked why people do not have the same compassion for the masses of innocent people and children in Gaza as they had for victims of Hamas October the 7th, 2023, and its massacre in Israel. She's quoted here as saying, I don't know about you, but I don't want to pay for genocide in a foreign country against foreign people for a foreign war that I had nothing to do with. And I will not be silent about it, stated Greene. She made similar assertions in a post at the end of July. Quote, it's the most truthful and easiest thing to say that October 7th in Israel was horrific. I'm glad she at least acknowledges that, by the way. And all the hostages must be returned, but so is the genocide. Humanitarian crisis and starvation happening in Gaza, she wrote at the time. Hey, that's exactly what AOC says. Hey, that's exactly what Rashida Tlaib says. Hey, that's exactly what Ilhan Omar says. That's what the Squad says. I mean, if you were to cover up her face and just look at the statement, you would say that's a garden variety leftist, but it's not. It's a so-called conservative saying these things. It's someone from a group of people that I'm terming the woke right. Previously, the U.S. House of Representatives voted to reject an amendment proposed by Greene, which called for the slashing of $500 million of aid to Israel. In 2018, Greene wrote a Facebook post that blamed the Rothschild families for starting wildfires in California using a laser from space. In 2021, Greene caused an uproar after she compared a supermarket's decision to add a logo to the badges of vaccinated workers to the yellow stars that the Jews were forced to wear in Nazi-occupied Europe. So what's she doing there? She's marginalizing the Holocaust. When you make comparisons like that, you're saying the Holocaust was maybe or perhaps or definitely not as bad as everybody makes it out to be. Again, I'll state my main point. These are sentiments that are not coming from the left. These are coming from the right. And they are, I believe, poisonous statements being used to influence people across the ideological spectrum to come against the nation of Israel, which is exactly what Zechariah 2,500 years ago predicted for the end of the age. Notice this screenshot here. This one comes from One American News, and it says this: Marjorie Trader Green, as we'll call her, quotes her. It says, "We don't go to heaven by how much money we pay Israel and how many of Israel's wars we fight and how many people are murdered as a result of it and how many children are starved and how many innocent people, whether Palestinians or Palestinian Christians or children, are blown to pieces while Israel is basically committing genocide in Gaza." Close quote. Gave you the statistics earlier. Going to give you some more in a minute. Why Israel is not committing starvation or genocide in Gaza. She's obviously got these talking points from the United Nations or Hamas. There she is, just mindlessly repeating them on OAN. Hey, I thought OAN was a conservative network. I was told that OAN is the substitute for Fox News. As Fox News drifts to the left, you can trust OAN. Well, isn't it interesting that you can turn on OAN today and be treated to these anti-Israel diatribes? If we can put that picture up just one more time, as she's being interviewed here by Matt Gaetz. My goodness, I thought Matt Gaetz was a conservative. I thought he was the one that was trying to become the Speaker of the House and dethrone, who was it, Kevin McCarthy? Do I got the name right? Because he was the more conservative candidate. And look at conservative A interviewing conservative B, and they sound exactly like any garden variety figure on the left. Another quote from Marjorie Trader Green. She says that that's not the way to heaven in response to Lindsey Graham's comments about why the U.S. should support Israel. So we have a quick clip from this video. It goes about 2 minutes, and let's go ahead and run that at this time if we could.
I did want to get your reaction to comments from Lindsey Graham recently. He gave a speech where he said that if the United States pulled the plug on Israel, God would pull the plug on the United States. Is that your understanding of Scripture and how God thinks about geopolitics?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that is like such a fake Christian doctrine. As a matter of fact, Jesus says that he is the way to God. He is the door. He is the way to heaven. He clearly states that in the Gospel of John. And it's said over and over in the New Testament. We don't go to heaven by how much money we pay Israel and how many of Israel's wars that we fight and how many people are murdered as a result of it and how many children are starved and how many innocent people, whether Palestinian, Christian, or children, are blown to pieces while Israel is basically committing genocide in Gaza. That's not the way to heaven. So I don't think I'll be taking Lindsey Graham's advice on that. And I think many Americans are fed up with it and they're seeing through it. You know, here's one thing. We can support our ally Israel, but at the same time, we do not have to bow down to this false gospel and this doctrine, which I would call a deception that has been just taught and basically hammered into many American Christians, good-hearted Christians, people that want to do the right thing. So, you know, I was furious when I saw that. And this has to stop, Matt. People are waking up to it, and I know they're sick and tired of it.
Never knew that Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Trader Green were authorities on the Bible. It's interesting how he brought up the subject of Scripture. And there she is giving her interpretation of Scripture. There he is, like a potted plant, with no cross-examination whatsoever to refute her inane ideas, which can easily be refuted. First of all, you'll notice she never quoted Genesis 12, verse 3, which is the central scripture in this whole discussion, where God specifically says those who bless Israel, the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And yes, that's the modern state of Israel. There's no other Israel other than that. That's where the nation, the land they went back into after 2,000 years of worldwide dispersion. And yes, in fulfillment of Bible prophecy, where God specifically said he would gather the Jewish nation into their land in unbelief in preparation for the end times. That's not some other group of people over there. Those are the Jewish people who are genealogically connected to the patriarchs going back to the book of Genesis. And yes, that's the group you need to bless. And you notice that she didn't even quote the relevant passage, Genesis 12, verse 3, where God says, those that bless Israel, I will bless, and those who curse Israel, I will curse. When asked about this question, she jumps to the New Testament, as if the New Testament cancels principles, eternal principles that God declared in the book of Genesis. I mean, you read Genesis 12, verse 3 yourself, and you tell me if there's a statute of limitations there. You tell me if God says, okay, this promise is no good after a particular point. God never says that because it's an eternal, immutable promise. The moment God chose Israel, he knew that Satan would come against Israel, and so he gave them a particular protective covering and promise by saying, the nations that cooperate with Satan and come against Israel will be cursed. The nations that bless Israel, by contrast, will be blessed. And look at world history to see how that promise has been validated. So she doesn't even quote the relevant passage. She moves into the Gospel of John, which is there for salvation purposes. It's not there to necessarily explain our relationship to the Jewish people. So she goes to the completely wrong book and the wrong chapters of the book to try to cancel what God said in Genesis 12, verse 3. And nowhere in John's gospel does Jesus say, hey, look, guys, Genesis 12, verse 3 is revoked. It's invalidated. I mean, somehow in Marjorie Trader Green's mind, she thinks that if she quotes the New Testament, that cancels unconditional eternal principles that God outlined in Genesis 12, verse 3. And then she makes this ridiculous statement that, we don't go to heaven by supporting Israel. Well, who in the world thinks that? I mean, I don't think that. I mean, if I thought that, I would believe salvation is by works. I mean, we all understand that we're saved by faith alone, by grace alone, by placing our trust in Christ alone. Nobody is saying that if you are a supporter of Israel, that you think that somehow your support for Israel is going to get you to heaven. So this is an example of what we call a straw man argument in logic, where you misrepresent the person you're trying to tear down. You don't reflect accurately what they believe. And it's called a man of straw man argumentation, because a misrepresentation is much easier to knock down than the actual truth. So she mischaracterizes what Zionists supposedly believe, and then she spends the rest of the time as a so-called conservative being interviewed by a conservative, Matt Gaetz, on OAN, supposedly the quintessential conservative network, regurgitating Hamas and UN statistics about how Israel is starving the Gazans and committing genocide. So what is happening here, folks? What is happening is the right itself, the MAGA movement itself, whether it's Steve Bannon, Stu Peters, Alex Jones, Candace Owens, Emerald Robinson, whether it's Matt Gaetz, whether it's Marjorie Trader Green, whether it's any Tucker Carlson, any of these pundits and influencers, I call them sinfluencers. What's happening is the right itself, is being poisoned against the nation of Israel, just like the left long ago has been poisoned against the nation of Israel, in fulfillment of what Zechariah said would happen 2,500 years ago. Let me throw someone else here into the mix, Megyn Kelly. Boy, I thought Megyn Kelly was a conservative. I thought she was a Republican. Boy, I've seen her on Fox News. She's great. She's wonderful. Well, think again. Here's Megyn Kelly having an interview with Marjorie Trader Green, just like Matt Gaetz, a conservative, was supposedly doing on a so-called conservative network. And the same thing happens. Marjorie Trader Green spouts inaccuracies, spouts Hamas statistics, UN statistics, and Megyn Kelly, supposedly a good lawyer, sits there like a potted plant with no cross-examination whatsoever. So there's Megyn Kelly playing the same role that Matt Gaetz played in the prior clip that we played earlier. So this comes from Yehuda Teitelbaum. And like the prior piece of writing that I gave you, this is extremely well done. Just go to this particular X account and read this 8-point refutation to what Marjorie Trader Green said on Megyn Kelly's show. This X account says as follows: Megyn Kelly has a choice right now. She can either keep her credibility or she can follow the path of right-wing grifters who've made it their mission to bash Israel without logic or facts. Her interview with Marjorie Trader Green was full of blatant false claims that collapse under the slightest. There's Proverbs 18, verse 17, folks. One man sounds right until another cross-examines him. That collapse under the slightest scrutiny. I won't be sharing it, this so-called interview, but here are some of the points that were mentioned. 8 lies by Marjorie Trader Green on the Megyn Kelly show. Lie number 1, AIPAC controls Congress. Refutation. AIPAC is made up of U.S. citizens who care about Israel. The lobbying budget in 2024 arose to $50 million. For comparison, Big Pharma spent $350 million. Tech and telecom spend hundreds of millions of dollars more. If AIPAC controls Congress with $50 million, what does that mean about the industry spending 10 times that amount? Lie number 2, congressional trips to Israel prove influence. Refutation. Members of Congress travel abroad constantly. They visit Ukraine, Taiwan, NATO countries, Japan, and South Korea. They are exposed to allies because America's global security depends on alliances. Israel is not unique here. The idea that a congressman is brainwashed by visiting a country is ridiculous. It's called diplomacy. Israel is making its case for why it's a strong ally. That's what every country does. Lie number 3, the U.S. is broke, so why give Israel $3.8 billion? You hear this constantly from the woke right. Why are we giving $3.8 billion to Israel? We're broke. Refutation. The figure is less than 1/10 of 1% of the federal budget. It's insignificant compared to entitlement programs or interest on the debt, and that money is not a handout. It's used to buy American weapons. Every dime cycles back into the U.S. economy, supporting hundreds of thousands of defense jobs in states across the country. The U.S. does not lose the money. Lie number 4 of 8. Israel is wealthy. It doesn't need aid. Refutation. Foreign aid is not charity. Israel's GDP doesn't matter. U.S. military aid is structured to guarantee Israel's qualitative military edge. America's law to ensure its ally isn't wiped off the map by larger hostile armies and terror groups. Israel spends more than almost any country in the world on defense, nearly 9% of GDP, because it has to. Lie number 5 by Marjorie Trader Green to Megyn Kelly. Other allies don't get special treatment. Refutation. Egypt and Jordan receive billions every year in U.S. aid. Taiwan gets special weapons deliveries. NATO members receive the ultimate form of aid, a U.S. security guarantee that obligates American troops to fight and die for them. Israel has never asked America to put a single Marine at risk for them. Lie number 6, Israel is allowed to use aid differently. Refutation. Yes, Israel is allowed to use a portion for domestic purchases, a condition written into the deal decades ago because Israel's defense industry works hand in hand with America's. Think Iron Dome, missile defense, drone tech. That integration makes U.S. weapons better and more effective globally. Lie number 7, the U.S. gets nothing in return. Refutation. Israel shares intelligence that saves American lives. It tests U.S. weapon systems in real combat and provides America with a secure base of operations in the world's most volatile region. Finally, lie number 8. Israel's aid is the real problem while America suffers at home. Refutation. The real drivers of debt are entitlement spending, mismanaged programs, and decades of fiscal irresponsibility. Blaming Israel for America's debt crisis is just scapegoating. Here's how this wonderful piece on X ends. Megyn Kelly knows better. She has the choice to use her brain and reject this nonsense, or to go down the path of lazy populists who think bashing Israel is the ticket to relevance. Is all of this true? And here's our final article. Is all of this true, that Israel is causing starvation in Gaza? Is this true? Notice this piece refuting that. This one comes from the Washington Post, and it says this: hunger in Gaza has many authors, but Israel is not one of them. August 7th, 2025. It says on Tuesday, Israel delivered nearly 2 million meals to suffering Gazans through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a non-governmental organization created this year with U.S. support to replace UNRWA, the corrupt Hamas-infiltrated UN relief agency. That is enough to feed nearly the entire Gazan population. I mean, how is it that Israel is starving the Gazans when they just donated enough meals to feed the entire Gazan population? Far from deliberate starvation in Gaza, Israel is doing something that no nation has ever done or ever been expected to do: to feed the population of the aggressor or force that attacked it while the war is still going on. The United States did not feed Germany and Japan while the war was going on. We forced their armies to surrender, and then we fed their population. See how different Israel is? It feeds the enemy population while the war is continuing. Indeed, the suffering is central to Hamas's strategy of survival, which is to weaponize the images of Palestinian misery to build international pressure on Israel to stop its military campaign before Hamas is destroyed. Unfortunately, that strategy is working. We see its success in the coverage of Western media outlets such as the New York Times, which recently published a front page photo of a Gazan mother holding her emaciated child to illustrate the suffering Israel was supposedly inflicting. It turned out that the boy was suffering from pre-existing health problems affecting his brain and muscle development, the Times acknowledged in an editor's note, though it continued to report he suffers from severe malnutrition. Of course, they failed to show his healthy, well-fed older brother, perhaps because his inclusion would have undermined that assertion. We see the successes of Hamas's strategy in the response of governments like France, Canada, Britain, Ireland, Spain, Norway, which have declared in response to the international outcry Hamas has generated that they will recognize a state of Palestine, thus rewarding Hamas for the October 7th, 2023 terrorist attack and its refusal to release Israeli hostages. As Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas explained on the Senate floor, Hamas resells looted supplies on the black market, allowing to take in more than $500 million in profit that fund Hamas's campaign of terror against Israel and its own people. Meanwhile, hundreds of trucks have sat inside Gaza filled with undelivered aid because the United Nations wouldn't distribute it and refused to let the Gaza Humanitarian Fund distribute it. The normal way to get humanitarian relief to civilians in wartime is to allow them to leave the conflict zone as refugees. But Gaza's neighbors refuse to allow the civilian population to flee. Jordan King's Abdullah II declared at the start of the war, no refugees in Jordan, no refugees in Egypt. Indeed, Egypt's response to the suffering of the Gazan people has been to reinforce its border wall with Gaza. But the real reason is they don't want to import Gaza's problems. Conclusion of the article. Of course, there is a policy of deliberate starvation in Gaza. It's being carried out by Hamas, which last week released photos of two emaciated Israeli hostages. The brother of one of the hostages told the UN Security Council this week, as my younger brother, a living skeleton, was forced to speak and dig his grave, the chubby and well-fed hand of a Hamas terrorist entered the frame. Suddenly, Hamas confirmed what we have known for months. The terrorists have plenty of food. The only ones starving in Hamas tunnels are hostages. So a tremendous article explaining, there's hunger in Gaza. And there's a lot of causes of it. But Israel is not one of the causes. Israel is the answer to the problem. Israel has tried to answer this particular issue by feeding Gaza, but the forces that be, the powers that be, won't allow the aid to get through because they're interested in creating a narrative that Israel is starving Gaza because they're trying to turn worldwide attention against Israel. And as they turn worldwide attention against Israel, they're hoping that they can derail Israel in the various victories that she is having over Hamas in Gaza. So that's our prophecy update for today. We've looked at the issues related to the Third Temple, and we've also looked at some issues related to the world turning against Israel. It's really happening. These things are really happening in real time, and consequently, we're moving into the type of end time scenario spoken in the scripture thousands of years ago. Let me conclude with one infomercial. I've gone a little long here today. Forgive me for that, but I want to get this in. We have a new artificial intelligence database. You might call it a search engine. And you can find that at the Andy Woods Ministries website. If you want to access this, go to askandy.andywoodsministries.org. We say here, try our new resource and ask Andy any biblical question. Now, I want to be clear, we are not using artificial intelligence to create content. This is a tool not designed to create content. It's a tool designed to retrieve content. It functions a lot like an index at the back of a book. If you're looking for a certain issue in that book, I guess you could read the whole book if you have time to do it, or you could do it the easier way. And you could look up in the subject index, author index, where an author commented on that particular subject that you're researching and go right to the page number. And it saves you a lot of time just by consulting the index in the back of the book. If you don't have an index, then you got to read the whole book. That's how this search engine, artificial intelligence search engine, functions. You have to understand that I've been at Sugarland Bible Church since 2010. Essentially what I do at Sugarland Bible Church, in addition to these prophecy updates, is I teach the Bible 3 times a week. Now, you do that for a period of 15 to 16 years, and what has piled up over the course of time is a lot of data and information. And people from all over the world ask us questions. Hey, where did you talk about this issue, salvation by faith alone? Where did you talk about that issue, the historicity of Jesus Christ, the virgin birth? And the truth of the matter is the library, the sermon library, is so big, a lot of times I can't remember where we addressed that given issue. Well, this artificial intelligence search engine will solve that problem. Because what you do is you go to the question box that you'll see there and you type in your question. And then you hit send. And it takes a couple of seconds to think, but then it brings up in very well written, beautiful paragraph writing, presentation, exactly what I teach and believe on a certain subject. Now, we have it set up where it's only searching my sermons. That's why we call this Ask Andy. So if you want to know what I've taught or what I think on a certain subject, you type it into the question box, you hit send, it takes a couple of seconds retrieving the data, and then it presents the data to you. Here's what Andy teaches on the virgin birth, etc. Now, when you scroll down, it will show you the exact sermons, most of them in video, some early on in audio, where I talked about those given subjects. And it will give you multiple clips, and you press on those clips, and it takes you to the exact point in the sermon where you don't have to listen to the whole sermon, where I dealt with a particular subject. Now, to my mind, this is technology that very few people are using. I think it's used a little in the business world. Very few Christian ministries are using this and even know about it. I think we are among the first, but the reason we invested in this and put it out there is for the benefit of the Bible student that wants to know what Pastor or Dr. Andy Woods thinks on a certain subject. And there's a great tool at your fingertips where you can discover that in a very short period of time. And the truth of the matter is we would be absolute fools if we did not take advantage of this technology. Let me reiterate, we are not using the technology, artificial intelligence, to create content. We are using it as a search engine to retrieve data from all of my teachings. And so we've loaded teachings in there going back to 2010, sometimes earlier. It receives the sermons in audio form, in written form if we have it. We can load my books that I've written into this search engine. And so when you ask a subject, it searches all of that data almost instantaneously and retrieves it in a easy to understand answer and format. And we encourage people to not just read the paragraph or two summation, but to go to the actual sermons themselves, where we discuss these different matters. So I want to make you aware of that. That's a brand new feature. And that's all I've got for today. We will see you next time, Lord willing, on Pastor's Point of View. God bless you.